Welcome back, and in this video I'm going to be going over how I had a top 100 bracket in all of the March Madness men's tournament challenge. So let's get right into it. So this is the bracket right here, and as you can see, this is a logo bracket picked solely on the logos, but in this video, I'm going to be going over how it kind of correlates to an actual basketball point of view. So let's start with the South region. We've got Alabama taking the win over Texas A&M, Corpus Christi. And in this bracket, I actually had all 1 seeds and 2 seeds winning, regardless of the logo, which, as we'll see later, may have been a bad decision. But we have Alabama, and then I said Maryland would beat West Virginia. That was a toss-up there. Maryland got pretty lucky and won, so that did work out for us. Then San Diego State, Charleston, we took the Aztecs, and then Virginia obviously sold that to Furman, could have gone either way. And then in the second round there in that top region, we did have San Diego State beating Virginia's logo, and that's obviously a defensive showcase, but obviously San Diego State got to play Furman there. And then Alabama, we had beating Maryland. From a basketball point of view, I thought the thesis was to start the tournament that West Virginia and the defensive team was going to beat Alabama. I thought Alabama would lose to the 9, and then Virginia would be there to scoop it up. But San Diego State plays the same type of ball, and you saw them, what they did to Alabama, just got them really off their game. In the bottom half of this bracket, we've got Creighton, just an easy win against NC State. There was a little while where it was a toss-up, but we had them winning there. And then I gave UCSB the win here, and seeing Baylor in that game against Creighton, that's really not too far to say. At halftime at UCSB was within 3 or winning, can't quite remember, but it's definitely a competitive game for a while, just couldn't pull it out there. Then Missouri over Utah State. Utah State just could not shoot the ball in that Sacramento regional. And then Princeton obviously beat Arizona. No one would have predicted that, so you have to go back to the logo. Maybe Princeton's logo is better, but that A is pretty iconic. And then I had Missouri beating Arizona, so that really could have paid off there since they got to play Princeton, but Princeton pretty much beat them up. So that was a misfire there, but we did have Creighton getting to the finals of that region, and then San Diego State winning. This is one of the places where I use my basketball IQ, even though San Diego State really should not have beat Creighton. Now they've got these 2 1-point games in a row over FAU as well, but I decided to pick San Diego State here, and it worked out. I thought that they'd bog him down, and this is one of the places where I didn't actually go by the logo because I think that Creighton logo is actually better. But let's move on to the Midwest region where we had Houston, again, didn't take any 16 or 15s. And then I said Auburn, 50-50 shot. That was what I was picking in most of my brackets. And then Miami Drake, obviously only a 2.5-point spread. Drake really choked that game away. And I'm really mad that they did, because that whole Miami run, which you'll see really ruined this bracket, really did hurt, and Drake really could have won that game easily. Kent State shouldn't have won, so Kent State was the wrong pick there. And then obviously Miami just steamrolled Indiana, wasn't really close. Houston could have lost Auburn. We had Houston anyways, but that was a close game. And then the second half, Houston pulled away, much like they did against Northern Kentucky. Then Houston-Miami, just really not a close game. Similar to what San Diego State did to Bama, just got them off their game, and the Cougars just could not get back into it. Iowa State-Pittsburgh, this is the worst game of the tournament by far. We had Iowa State winning. I did not foresee them just not scoring, and they couldn't without Caleb Grill. Xavier Kennesaw State was the best 3-14 of the tournament. Kennesaw really choked it from up 14, lost, but we did have Xavier there. And then we had Iowa State winning in that next game, so we won't even really talk about that Xavier Pitt game. Wasn't too interesting. Texas, and then we had Penn State. Penn State shot the lights out against Texas A&M, then gave Texas a run for their money with a late comeback. Just couldn't get it to make their Cinderella run. And with that, that means that only Princeton was the double-digit seed to make it to the Sweet 16. They're always telling you in your bracket predictions, always have a double-digit seed getting to the Sweet 16. Well, I don't think a lot of people had Princeton being that one, so it was pretty useless to do, anything this year, as you can see by these Elite 8 teams. But that's why this bracket was so good. We had Texas over Iowa State here. Pretty standard play there. Texas was super hot going into the tournament, and then obviously I was very upset when Texas lost to Miami, but as we get to the Final Four, we'll figure out that maybe that's not the worst thing in the world, given where this bracket did end up at the end of the tournament. Then going into, let's go to the West region now. We had pretty much a perfect first round, just picking the higher seeds. I mean, this was all chalk, but we did pick Boise State there, so I don't think anything was too out of the ordinary here. Arizona State TCU game was the game of the first round in this region. Great fight by Arizona State, but TCU did just win it at the buzzer or at the end. And then Kansas-Arkansas, I mean, that one could have gone either way. Great game, and Kansas loses. We did have Kansas advancing another round, but that did make it easier on UConn. UConn stamped St. Mary's after a pretty competitive first half, but as they do, they just start shooting well, and then the defense kicks up. Sanogo and the bigs just get it going, and UConn's on to the third round, easily beat Arkansas. I mean, you don't even really have to talk about these UConn games so much. They've been steamrolling this competition, and they've a decently hard schedule. But let's get to the bottom where we had TCU Gonzaga. Gonzaga barely wins it, but really it wasn't that close. TCU hit that shot at the buzzer to have a pretty brutal backdoor cover. But then UCLA against what we had, Boise State, closer than you might have thought. Northwestern gave them a fight, but UCLA did win. I did think that they could lose that. Northwestern had beat Purdue, but as we see, that doesn't really mean anything. And the Big Ten was pretty bad overall again this year. So Gonzaga against UCLA, we did have Gonzaga. Actually, we had Boise State winning over UCLA, so that was actually not a good pick. But we did have Gonzaga making it to the Elite Eight, so we remained perfect in the Elite Eight there, despite only getting 2 of the Sweet 16 teams, which is a W there. This is what I'd call the money quadrant, the East here. Even though it was complete trash, we did make it out with a lot more points than a lot of other people, so let's get right into it. Obviously, I didn't have any 16 seeds winning. Maybe FDU's logo was better, but no one in their right mind could have predicted that upset. That was insane. FAU's closest game of the tournament, besides that San Diego State one, was this Memphis game. And, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You wouldn't get lucky once. Maybe you won't get lucky twice, although San Diego State did get lucky twice. But FAU pretty much got it done against Memphis. And then the FDU game was close with 6 minutes left, and then they were able to pull away there to make that to the Sweet 16. Duke, Oral Roberts, we had both upsets here. Louisiana, obviously from a basketball point of view, was the closer game of the two. Shocking to me. But then Tennessee was able to pull it out against Duke. That was a great game there. And then FAU beating Tennessee was a really shocker to me. I mean, let's think about their path. Memphis was decent, but it's an 8-9 matchup, so it's a toss-up. Then you get the gimme game in FDU, which was closer than it should have been probably, but you can't really say anything after they just beat Purdue 2 days earlier. And then, Tennessee was pretty fraudulent without Ziegler, but I thought they could, make a run to the Final Four here just because they had beat Duke in that previous game. But I think what we've seen over the course of this tournament is that FAU is a pretty dang good 9 seed, if not better, and maybe they were getting underrated because of their soft schedule. They have the record similar to Houston's. Obviously, they didn't play the opponents out of conference. And then this bottom middle, we had Kentucky Providence. We just got both wrong. We predicted another 14 here in Montana State. That was supposed to be the closest spread game. In fact, Kansas State was not supposed to make it as far as they did at all. So they were 8.5-point favorites against Montana State. In this Kentucky game, they were underdogs. In this Michigan State game, they were also underdogs, which is insane. So I would say not too much blood here, but we did have Michigan State in the Elite Eight. We were lucky to get them to win over Marquette. That was a pretty dominant performance. We knew Marquette was fraudulent. I mean, this whole bracket was pretty fraudulent. I thought Duke was one of the few teams that was legit, and then they lost to Tennessee. So I don't even know what to think now. I think FAU was the team that was legit using hindsight, but K-State, Michigan State didn't have much blood, or we had Michigan State there, lost, so then we needed FAU, and we clutched up big time, having FAU in the Final Four. So we got 3 out of 4 of our Final Four, lost Texas, as I mentioned earlier. Now, the thing where this may have helped in the fact that this bracket was already good because we got FAU, we had SDSU. This is one of the more basketball decisions. Again, I think FAU's logo is better than San Diego State. I'll put it out there. But San Diego State, I just said, this probably isn't happening. So I'm just picking San Diego State to go to the final because I think they beat FAU if they got that far. No 9 seed or lower has ever won in the Final Four. I was thinking all of this as I picked San Diego State to get to the title, and for a lot of that game, that was looking like the wrong choice. But then San Diego State, Butler hits the buzzer beater, and they're on to the title game, and that lifted this bracket into the top 100. Then Miami against UConn. See, the blessing where it may have been good that Miami won instead of Texas is that Miami was much easier for UConn to beat than Texas would have been, in my opinion. I still think UConn probably would have won, given Texas's struggles down the stretch in that against Miami, which UConn, quite frankly, didn't do. But it's all about matchups, so I'm glad that UConn was able to handle Miami the way they did, and then, in the final, UConn gets the victory, so this bracket ends up in the top 50 nationwide. So comment your thoughts below. What should I have done better in this bracket? Very put together and just a non-basketball manner, but then I'm applying the basketball knowledge here. So let me know your thoughts down below.